Hi, I'm Christine Daigle.
JP Rindfleisch.
Kevin Tumlinson.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. So I am literally trying to figure out what day it is, what time zone I'm in. I am so screwed up after this Greece trip. I kind of fell off the radar because like the Wi-Fi there wasn't that great, so like I wasn't able to keep up with everybody, and the time difference was so wild. Like I was waking up when everybody else was kind of going to sleep. But this like they told me it was a little island off the coast of Athens, so I figured I fly into Athens, probably a quick little ferry ride or something to get over there. No, it was an 8 hour ferry ride
Oh, wow.
off the coast of yeah.
What?
So this was way off the coast of Athens. So it was way out there. It felt like one of those Indiana Jones montages where they show, like the map and they've got like plane going from here to here and then a boat going from here to here. Like that was essentially my trip. The writing or the reading retreat was fun because once we got there, get to hang out with a bunch of readers, people that are just enthusiastic about books and alcohol.
Yes.
So like you mix those two things together, and that was a good time. About
Yeah.
halfway through the trip, I get an email from the airline that I had booked my return trip on, and one of the legs of my return trip got canceled. So they basically gave me my new return trip, and I had two other layovers on there that weren't there before.
Oh, boy.
And like there was nobody I could really talk to about it because I booked the trip using my American Express card. I thought I would use some of my points and because you get like three times the points when you do that kind of thing. But when you do that, what happens is you've got nobody at American Express you can talk to when something goes wrong. They tell you to talk to the airline. And you call
Yeah.
the airline tells you to talk to American Express.
Right.
So you basically have to accept it. But like this return trip, like I had to fly from Athens to Stockholm. And I got in Stockholm at I think it was 10:30 at night, and then my next flight was 6 o'clock in the morning. So it was one of those deals where I wasn't there long enough where I could get a hotel room. So I had to sleep at the airport. And like there's no place to sleep at an airport, not really.
No.
But like this airport was really weird. Like I've never been to Stockholm before. But like it only gets dark there for like 2 hours. So
Hmm.
like it got dark at like 11:30 and it got light again at 1:30 in the morning. And after the people from my plane cleared out, there was literally nobody in this airport. Like I was wandering around, like all the restaurants were closed. There was no security. There were no cleaning people. It was just me and my little wheelie bag going from one end of the terminal to the other. It was very surreal. So I,
And
I
there's your
spent
next novel. Like, are,
Yep.
are we going to get an
yeah.
empty
So
airport thriller?
while you were being held hostage in Stockholm, did you find yourself sympathizing with the people at the airport?
Yes.
No.
Maybe like five people on the planet who got that joke, and I'm glad
I
that
got it.
that
I was
JP is
here.
one of them.
You're gonna have to explain the joke.
The Stockholm Syndrome?
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
terrible.
So anyway, the moral of the story is it was a
Anyway, moving
ridiculous
on.
amount of travel. Like
Yeah.
the return trip, I did 30 hours straight without sleep to get from starting point to back home again.
Oh,
Um,
boy. Did you hallucinate?
I think I am right now.
That's right.
You're actually not
We're
here. We're
not
all
even. Yeah,
imagination.
it's
Yeah.
actually Wednesday. Oh, oh,
JP,
that's a lot.
you were
Anyway,
talking about your direct sales earlier. What's going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah. Well, I've been doing a lot of direct sales stuff through like TikTok and my website. And this weekend things went bonkers and I ran out of all of my stock. So now I'm at the stage where I'm looking into like short print runs, which is a great problem to have. And I have more stock that just showed up actually on as we're on this call. But yeah, I'm playing the game of trying to find printers who can compete against print on demand. And there are surprisingly, to no one's surprise, in the US, a ton of printers who are not competitive with print
Right.
on demand, or like nearly double print on demand. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So it's been a journey, but no, I mean, it's a great problem to have, right?
Yeah.
No.
what kind of numbers are you printing? Like when you do a bulk run?
So I'm starting with 500 for now, and then we'll
Okay.
see if we can jump up there. But like, this is my space, so I need
Well,
to
that
find
that
space.
was that was that was my next question. So you're actually shipping these out yourself, right? Because I think you said you were
Yes,
personalizing them or
yes,
something before they go. And
yep.
okay.
And if I continue to hit the numbers that I was hitting like this weekend, that has to totally change. But it's a good problem to have. It's
Yes, it
just
is.
it's one of those fun business shifts now.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
I don't need to look for a day job problem, which is
Well,
awesome.
yeah, which I mean is great because I don't have one. So
Well, if you can get past like find a way to do this without, having to touch the books, having to personalize them, there's a few companies out there that'll do the drop ship part for you. You send the order information, and like a lot of them will interface now with Shopify. I don't know if that's how you're doing your direct sales. Like you can pass that feed right over, and like they'll send the book out, and you don't have to touch anything.
Yeah.
Um, I never got into that portion of it, but I printed a lot in bulk. And I usually did like 5,000 at a time. I mean, 500 is great, but like the bigger number you can do, obviously you save
Oh,
even
yeah.
more and more money.
Yeah.
So if a book is selling, even if it's going to take you, a year or whatever to get rid of that inventory, sometimes it's worth writing that check or maxing out the credit card or whatever you got to do to get that print run done because the profits are there.
Yeah. Yeah. My one problem with it is especially with TikTok, the unboxing. Everyone seems to like that, and that always seems to help. So it's trying to let go of that process, which I'm not there yet, but I will be soon.
Let it go.
No.
Yeah, very cool.
All right, Kevin, what is in the news?
All right. Well, first up, influencers are taking over the marketing industry. We've actually talked about this sort of thing before, but for the first time, ad revenue from user-generated content and platforms will exceed the amount earned from professionally produced content this year. While influencers already dominate the skincare and makeup industries, creators are booking lucrative deals with household goods brands. Unilever CEO Fernando Fernandez said the conglomerate would hire 20 times more influencers to pursue a social first marketing strategy, citing that consumers feel, quote, suspicious of corporate branding. The global influencer marketing industry is expected to grow by 36% between 2024 and 2025 to $33 billion.
This makes a lot of sense, but makes me wonder what's going to happen with traditional commercials. I'm guessing they're
Mhm.
going to just go away. I mean, because at some point they're going to just start running whatever they're creating with the influencers.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you think about it, if you can go directly to an influencer, you know who their audience is, you know the size of that audience, so they all the little, check boxes that they've got, like they can take off everything and really, drill down on their targeting, which is fantastic. If you think back to just, running a TV spot on NBC or something like that was a complete scattershot. You've got no idea who's watching it, who's not watching it.
Yeah.
This is really good. I mean, the closest thing I can think of to it is, Hulu has the ability, for people to create ads and you can bid for those ads, like to actually run them. It's very similar to the way Facebook ads run. But even this, I still think is probably better just because you're able to go directly to that audience.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you how desperate the sort of TV ad spot thing is getting is like Paramount has been blitzing Facebook with ads trying to attract people to anybody to come in and pay for ad spots on the Paramount Plus app. And in the ads, they're saying things like, they can guarantee a certain number of views and unskippable ads and things like that. But the backlash to that has been huge. Like if you go in comments on all those ads on Facebook, like, all these regular everyday people are saying, well, I just canceled Paramount because, if you're going to force me to watch this person's ad, I don't want a part of it. So it's kind of backfiring, I guess.
Well, in a way, it's a lot like 1983 again. Like when the ads comes, the ad starts running on Paramount. That's when you get up and you refill your drink and you hit the bathroom. And
Yeah.
they tell you it's going to be a minute and a half. There's a nice little
Yep.
timer there, so you know how long you've got.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think it's just a matter of time before somebody's got some kind of hack out there to somehow fast forward through those things. And like because that happened with TiVo and some of these other services. Like you never had to look at an ad. Somebody
Yeah.
will find a workaround.
Yeah. I already have one. It's called I don't subscribe to Paramount Plus.
Perfect.
Next up, AI doesn't know what an orgasm sounds like. So sad. Audiobook actors grapple with the rise of robot narrators. Narrator Annabelle Tudor quips that, quote, AI doesn't know what an orgasm sounds like. Capturing the article's central point, synthetic voices still can't deliver the raw and intimate emotion, birth scenes, sex scenes, tears, laughter, that makes human read audiobooks memorable. Recording one finished hour can take actors 2 to 3 hours. 5,000 Australian voice acting jobs are at risk, and authors worry poor robot reads will turn listeners off the medium altogether. Australia has no laws on AI training data, voice cloning, or labeling deepfake content. leaving creators vulnerable and prompting calls for transparency before the industry, quote, drives straight into dystopia.
I just wanted you
All
to
for
read that
lack of an
headline.
orgasm. Yeah,
That's
I
all.
knew.
I just wanted you to read that headline.
And I was fully on board. So when you start rolling this kind of thing out, and this is a shock value thing, and they're just trying, I think that this is much more, well, let me put it a different way. This is less of a problem than what they're trying to make it. I don't think anybody's going to turn off audiobook listeners because the robots are taking over. I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's certain content that definitely you're going to want a someone who can emote and actually do the range of emotion or sounds apparently that are tied in with this content. But I don't think that means that the robots have to go. I think that this whole thing serves a role in this business. It's inevitable.
I, for one, would like to hear a sampling of AI orgasms, and I think that sounds
like a text-to-speech thing.
It probably sounds like a fax machine. Remember that noise a fax machines make?
It's like a whole new fetish to get involved in, the robot orgasm.
I've been trying to listen to the AI narrated stuff, and I haven't stumbled into an AI narrated orgasm yet, but just in general, and I think I've kind of figured out why I have a problem with it. The fact that there's no human element to it, like my brain keeps tuning it out. And it's not intentional. Like I'll try to force myself to listen to it, and like my brain just starts to wander immediately, versus just listening to a regular audiobook narrated by a person. So I think there's something there, or better, not there, that our brain is somehow recognizing, and it's making it difficult to listen to this stuff. Very similar to like when you're watching CGI graphics, in an action movie or something, like it's fake even when it looks real.
Yeah, Uncanny Valley, that whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that problem ever goes away. And I think that's the bigger issue here. They can teach it to make whatever sound they want. That they'll get past that hurdle pretty quick.
I think it was on the Creative Pen a couple of episodes ago. They were talking about AI narration and how you can now, the most recent update that's coming through, you can add in specific emotion and alterations like that. And I think like that does have a place, definitely. I'm one that likes the human narration because, this, of course, with marketing, like if you can talk about the actual narrator you had, you add a little bit of, umph to it. So that's where I'm at. But I think that, like for me, when I am working on my own stuff, I use text to speech and I listen back at like a 2 to 3x speed. It's just super duper fast, super robotic. A little bit more naturalization to that can help me process it mentally, so I can see where some things can be useful, especially when you're listening to things extremely fast and not looking for that human output.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before, but I was never an audiobook person, but I started, and it was because of the narrator. I listened to 6 lit RPG books, which is not my genre, although the books are fantastic, but just because the narrator was so fabulous and such a great storyteller.
I think what JP's saying though is that he's listening for at 2x, and that would be a 2x orgasm, not to be confused with a triple X.
That's exactly. Yep, that was
all right. Okay. BookBub plans to allow authors to contact followers. This will only end in disaster. In an email that just came out from BookBub, they announced that they are developing a way for authors to contact their BookBub followers. Authors can join the waitlist to be one of the first to learn more about this new feature when they start to invite authors to try it out. There's another name for this, by the way, and it's called your email newsletter list.
Wow.
I was like, do readers want this?
Okay.
I don't know.
Just looping back to my joke. Yeah, they do want this, right? Because that's the whole reason a reader would get on a mailing list in the first place. Now, the thing is, BookBub is cultivating this in a different way. So the readers who are signing up for that mailing list are signing up to hear about deals. So that's where the whole qualifying thing comes in. We qualify the leads that get on the email lists that we own. BookBub's been a huge advantage for a lot of authors over the years, but they haven't been cultivating lists of people who want to interact with authors. They've only been cultivating lists of people who want cheap books.
Yeah.
So what I think is going to happen is a mass exodus. This is why I say this is a bad thing. It's a mass exodus from BookBub, which is going to make it less effective for the authors. Everybody gets hurt.
Well, you would hope that there would be an opt-in or opt-out for this for users of
Following.
BookBub. Yeah,
Yeah.
like do you want authors to contact you? Yes, no, hopefully some specificity for like specific
Well,
authors. Otherwise, I think it's
yeah,
going to be a
as
disaster.
we know, consumers always read everything that they agree to.
Yeah, they do.
So
Yep, they spend hours reading them.
And one of my biggest pet peeves is when a company gets my email address and I get like a message every single day from them.
yeah,
And that's kind of where it feels like this is going. And that's when I unsubscribe. Like if I buy something, because first of all, like they're not really even asking you most of the time if you want to go on that mailing list. They just automatically add you. And so that
Right.
already puts me, at a defensive position where I'm angry at them, just for that. And then all of a sudden they're hitting my inbox every day. If BookBub is trying to do the same thing, I can see that being a problem, and then they're going to lose a subscriber, like Kevin said, for the things that actually matter.
Yeah.
Because I've done, BookBub has alerts you can do for like new releases for less. You can do brand new, just a new release alert. They've got a bunch of different things that they can do, but the only one that works for them is the deep discount books. That's
yeah,
that's what they're known for, and that's what they're always going to be known for. That's their niche. They can't change that.
yeah.
They start spamming people, then they're going to lose those people too. Like everybody's going to go.
Yeah,
You know,
I almost
go ahead, JP.
I almost think like the key, and it's always been the key, is make sure that your book, your back matter, has the directive for the readers to get to your newsletter, and that you
Yeah,
leave this portion alone, because this is that front end group that is not necessarily interested in what you have to
right.
say. You need to cultivate the small fraction of those people into your newsletter. And I think sort of deleting that phrase and going all the way to the front end is a bad idea.
Yeah, that dovetails right in with what I was going to say, which is, they're going to have rules and restrictions and probably software to block you from doing things like, hey, go, get my free book, go do this and get on my mailing list because they don't want you breaking them out of that walled garden.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, this is really kind of pointless because what good does it do to interact with them if you can't ever ask them to take an action?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And they've got those websites now too for authors. So I don't
yeah.
know. No, thank you.
That's too much
Too much.
control. I'm not on board. I'm not a fan.
Fair.
Hey, this is Kevin Tumlinson, and it seems to me like you might need a little help. Maybe hand off all that stuff that's keeping you from writing. At Author Anchor, we connect authors with skilled, affordable virtual assistants trained specifically for the publishing world. Your personal VA handles everything from book production to marketing and social media, freeing you up to focus on what matters most, your writing. Book a discovery call today and we'll find that perfect VA for you. Plus, mention the Writers Inc. podcast and you'll get $50 off your first month. Visit authoranchor.com and get matched with your personal VA so you can just write. But I am a fan of what's coming up next.
Yeah. JD, who is up this week?
This week we've got Andrew Gulli on. He's the managing editor of Strand Magazine. He's also kind of a literary detective. Over the years, he's uncovered lost material for some of the biggest authors in history. Recently, he's uncovered new stories from Ian Fleming and Graham Greene. And finding them is only part of the story. Getting permission to publish them is a whole other thing. So he's here to tell us all about it. Here he is, Andrew Gulli.
Well, I am excited about this one. A lot of times when we are talking to people, we're talking about recent new release stuff. We're talking about books that, maybe have at least been written in the past decade, if not the past year or past few months. And this time, though, we're going to be talking about a couple of works that are basically being rediscovered and brought to the public via Strand Magazine, which in itself is sort of legendary. And I'm talking now with Andrew Gulli, who's the managing editor of Strand Magazine. Welcome to Writers Inc.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Did I manage to get all the details right, Andrew? Did I get
You
everything
did.
right? Okay. Now this is intriguing because we, like I said, we normally, when we're talking to someone, we're not talking about something that was written 50, 60 years ago. But that's what you guys have managed to pull together in this issue. We've got two works, one from Ian Fleming called The Shameful Dream, which was written long before Bond ever existed. And then we've got Reading at Night, which is Graham Greene's ghost story. What's the story here? How did these come, across your desk, as it were?
Well, this is an interesting thing. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a writer, and I don't know how the conversation, conversations have their way of turning off topic. And he just said, I'm with this man who knows all about these Ian Fleming manuscripts. His name is Mike von Blaricum, and I'm taking him around this town called Putin Bay in Ohio. And I said, yeah, well, that's interesting. I said, I would love to publish something by Ian Fleming because it's been our forte over the past 15 years. We've done Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald,
Yeah.
Raymond Chandler, James M. Cain. So it's in our type of a thing. So he said, look, I'll have you talk to Mike and, we'll see what we can come up with. So this was a couple of years ago. I eventually spoke to Mike and he said, look, there are a couple of stories that were only distributed in these special editions of 200 copies and they were sold for $250. So, he said, so why don't you talk to the Ian Fleming estate about it? So he turned me over to the Ian Fleming estate and I spoke to a very nice man named Simon and he was saying, "Okay, I think we can do something about this because we have plans on having this released, these a couple of these stories released in some of his lesser writings this, in a couple of years." So I asked for permission from the Ian Fleming estate. They gave me permission to publish this, and the rest is history. That's as far as Ian Fleming goes. In terms
Yeah.
of Graham Greene, I've always been a big fan of Graham Greene. I love his entertainments. I love the humor in Our Man in Havana, uh, the power and the glory, the human factor. I'm a big, big, big fan of Graham Greene. So I was looking at the manuscript list of a lot of his papers that were in the University of Texas, and I found something called Reading at Night, which did not look familiar to me. So I looked at the manuscript and it was finished because Graham Greene, I think, like many writers, started off projects and did not finish them. And, I've had my fair share of falling in love with something that he's written only to see that it's just cut off in middle and just thinking to myself, what if, what if, what if,
Yeah.
Uh, so I looked at this and this was complete. It was a completed short story. And I contacted a couple of Graham Greene scholars, Jonathan Wise and Michael Hill, and they were very, very, very helpful. And eventually they helped put my case forward to the estate. And his grandniece was a wonderful, wonderful person to work with, and she gave us permission to publish this in the Strand. So I don't want to bore you with all the stories or frustrate you with all the stories where you look for something and you do all the right things and you cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and then you find that you get a big no.
Yeah. Yeah. How often does that happen? Do you get that a lot?
More often than I care to admit, but
Which
this is a
seems
type.
strange. That seems strange to me because these are the estates don't want this work to like have a resurgence or something, or like what's their reasoning?
It's very hard to know. You just
Yeah.
have to respect it and move on with it and just kick a wall after that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Because the thing about it is if you knew you're going to get a no from the beginning, it's fine. But you start off with such hope and such, dreams and just imagining how the whole thing will look in the layout of the magazine, and then there's just a one sentence that ends it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it which was more challenging for you to get permission to print, Fleming or Green?
You know what? They both were, it's always difficult to just make a good presentation, let people know what your vision is. So
Yeah.
to me, that's one of the biggest, biggest hurdles. Sometimes it's understood, sometimes it's appreciated by an estate or an agent or a family member. And sometimes people just look and they just feel like whatever's been out there should be out there and that's it.
Yeah.
And it was just so nice that the two estates were just so proactive. They just were so easy to deal with and they were happy by the response from the release. And that is also something that's very, very valuable because you don't want to upset people and you don't want to make a
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. especially with the nature of Strand Magazine, that you wouldn't want to upset people who might have a voice in that in that arena. It might make it even tougher for you to get the permission to print stuff, right?
Exactly. I mean, fortunately, any story of somebody who, is got upset about something, they're few and far between. I mean, there's always the case whereby, for example, an estate knew something was published, and I'll even say to the press, and I'll say, hey, they've known this has existed, and then suddenly, it's kind of like telephone. Somebody calls it a rare manuscript. Somebody calls it a never before manuscript. Somebody says that I'm like Indiana Jones, like, and I just, found this like hidden in an attic. And before you know it, people are coming back to me and saying, that's not how it was. And I'm like, well, if you look carefully, I never said that.
Right. Look, people want the legend, okay? Just let them build the legend. Let them run with
I
it.
know, I know. A few years ago, kind of a radio producer slash personality said, I'd like to find a way of free packaging you as this manuscript hunter. And I said, well, I would love to be the manuscript hunter in this type of a character you're talking about. I'm not. Most of this stuff is very, very boring, and then sometimes you strike oil and it's exciting,
Yeah.
but manuscript hunter, no, I'm not a manuscript hunter.
Just embrace it. Just roll with it. Get yourself a leather fedora, nice coat,
I know. I
perhaps
was
even a whip.
talking, I was talking to some people, and I said, yeah, we should, just tongue in cheek. I said we should do something like a reality show and just like over dramatize like negotiations. Like, I told you I won't. I can't offer you this much. Oh, I
Yeah.
can. Just play it up.
Yeah. So this Fleming story in particular is interesting because it's pre-Bond. The thing that he's most known for, what was how is it different from his work on James Bond?
Well, the interesting thing is that there are a few similarities. The main character is his name is Caffrey Bone, which is one letter away from James Bond,
Yeah.
and he's a world weary kind of a hack of a journalist, and it has some similarities to James Bond. I would say this guy is a little more on the empathetic side, a little more somebody who's caring. Uh, and he has a boss who is like a James Bond villain. He's like the love child of Ernst Stavro Blofeld and Logan Roy.
Hmm.
He finds all sorts of interesting, sadistic ways of firing all the people who work for his company. And when you look at it, you just say to yourself, oh my God, this was Ian Fleming getting into an exercise of how somebody with some pretty good morals would be matched up against a boss who is very, very much like a James Bond villain. I mean,
Yeah.
there's scenes of, he's in a Rolls Royce, the main character, and he's just thinking he's about to be fired. And I won't give you the twist. Uh, and, mentions of Rolls Royces and parties and all of that. So, it shares some characteristics with the James Bond books and stories,
Yeah.
and he had a very strong, strong voice. And the interesting thing is, a year later, he started to work on Casino Royale
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
he wrote this.
Okay. And that was the book that launched 1,000 ships right there.
Exactly, exactly. And the reason he did it was to distract himself from his upcoming wedding. So if you can imagine, I think anybody who's gotten involved in wedding planning needs a distraction. And
Yeah.
instead of the distraction of what most people do, which is, you know, eat
Yep.
food that's not very good for them because they're stressed about a wedding, like I did.
Yeah. Me too, now that
He's
I think about
You too, didn't you? So I
it.
think he was the only person in history who made a lot of money off of the whole wedding planning distraction thing.
Created a legacy, as it were. I mean, he created an entire career around it, but he ended up creating one of the most iconic characters of all time.
Yeah, and if he stayed single, we would not have had James Bond.
What an interesting twist. Okay. So there's a book right there. That's the one you should contribute to that as the literature hunter or whatever. What was the title? What was it? People keep calling you?
Well, yeah, exactly. You can have a
Yeah.
title of like wedding planning,
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
best.
So these were both of these were early works for Fleming and Green. Did you note you've clearly read both authors, both their bodies of work. So were there like little telltale, things, key differences, some hints at what they would go on to do, like, stylistically, was there any weakness, I guess? I guess that's kind of what I'm going for. Like, did you see him getting stronger later?
Well, in Fleming's case, I just felt, and there was an early work actually I read that he wrote when he was a very young man. He was in his 20s. And what you saw in both of these works was somebody who was kind of unsure about what style they wanted to veer into. And in this
Yeah.
story, it has tension. It has that whole thing of what Fleming advised beginning authors, and he said, if you ever want to write for a living, and if you ever want to be successful, and again, I'm paraphrasing him, you need to have people turn one page after the next. So he had that, but this was more about power, more about how people could try to uh, enforce their will on people in ways, and it was less about action, less about the whole concept of James Bond, which is this almost mythical figure righting the wrongs. And that's the reason why people like James Bond, because we live in an uncertain world, and James Bond represents this type of security we all have. In Graham Greene's case, he wrote this after he had just completed a burnt out case.
Okay.
And he felt that he did not have another novel left in him, and he wrote this short story. And fortunately, he had a few more novels before he called it a day. And it has when Graham Greene wrote the Supernatural, what he always did is he didn't write something that would disappoint you. For example, I love H.G. Wells, but
Yeah.
H.G. Wells was somebody who could at times, if he veered into something like a ghost story, it was always that the narrator must have had something wrong with him or had,
Right.
maybe drank a little too much, and that's why he saw the room spinning and devils walking around. But in Graham Greene's case, what he did is he always would have this sort of a person who's very level-headed, not a mystic in any sense of the word. And he did this in a couple of other stories. And then by the end of the story, you feel that he is swept in this very uncertain world, and anything horrible can happen.
Yeah.
A funny side note is he wrote a couple of stories, and they would about ghost stories, and they would always end in a movie theater with something horrible happening.
Okay. Clearly a phobia being explored there.
And it's interesting because I'll have to, I will tell you, Hollywood and moving pictures are very, very good to Graham Greene, better than most writers.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of motion pictures, I mean, do you think either of these stories has legs for some sort of adaptation?
I do. I mean, I just think I was very cynical about the TV series Succession, and then I
Yeah.
just became a big, big, big fan of it. And I don't know why that happened, because most of the characters, it's very difficult to find any sympathy for them.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the extras. But what I liked about this story, the Shameful Dream, is it had that whole feeling of Succession, almost, of
Yeah.
the cutthroat nature of the publishing industry or the newspaper industry. But in this story, there's a character who's very sympathetic. So I think there's a chance that that could turn into something. I hope it will. And in the case of the Graham Greene short story, it would make for an interesting short film on Netflix. I
Yeah.
hope Wes Anderson is hearing me.
I'm sure he's a big fan of the show. Hi,
He
Wes.
better be.
Yeah, that's the you said something about the Fleming estate was are they, you said they're preparing like a collection or something? They're putting
Yeah,
something else in?
they're putting something else in it. I believe it'll be released on the 117th birthday of Ian Fleming, and that will be coming up in about 8 days or so, and that will have a lot of the rare this story. Uh, it'll have some correspondence of Fleming with Raymond Chandler,
Yeah.
and if you ever are as dorky as I am, because or maybe there are few people as dorky as I am when it comes to this stuff. There's a great interview that Ian Fleming conducted with Raymond Chandler in the 50s, and you're just seeing these two giants and
Yeah.
almost sharing but having different worldviews about fiction writing. And to me, that was just incredible.
I'm gonna have to find that. Is that, was it audio or was it
It's I believe it was audio. I mean,
okay.
I think I think Chandler is having some difficulties later in his life, so at times it could be a little hard to make out what he was saying, but there's
Yeah.
enough just for you to get these wonderful, wonderful nuggets of wisdom.
Well, first of all, I'm obsessed with listening to these old authors talking, old authors, old school authors talking about their work and their craft, as often as I can. But those two together, like both of those were influential. Like I considered my career pretty much to be like a pulp fiction career for the biggest chunk of it. So they were both influential in that.
Well, if you the interest is sad thing, and it's controversial to say it, but some of these old style writers, either they could be very shy, either it could be very difficult to find them, and at times I found that they would speak, but they wouldn't. They were. I think that their works were something that you could never understand from hearing them talk about their works. It
Yeah.
was just this magic that would happen when they put their fingers to the typewriter or were writing it down in a book or a journal. And the writer who I found was just brilliant and entertaining was Faulkner. There are
Hmm.
long recordings of him speaking, I think, to students in the University of Virginia.
Yeah.
And the other person was Evelyn Waugh, not so much for his writing as much as for being very entertaining and giving the person interviewing him a bit of a hard time.
Those are the
But
best
those
ones.
were yeah, but those were people who you would listen to them and you would never ever forget those interviews.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm after. As a writer, I don't know. There's a part of me that kind of longs for that era of, I don't know. It's hard to describe. I mean, especially with the Pulp Fiction guys, like they were cowboys. I mean, they were kind of just running and gunning the whole time. Sit down,
Yeah,
write a book.
they had a very difficult time of things. I mean,
Yeah,
we published last year John D. MacDonald's story,
yeah.
and when I was doing some research about him, I came upon a video that he where he gave a speech, and he just was saying how he struggled and how he would always get these manuscripts returned back, and he knew how to take shoe prints off of manuscripts, but he didn't know how to take cigarette burns off of manuscripts or grease stains off of manuscripts. He said, and one day his postman, who probably hated him because he'd always be delivering rejection slips, slipped an envelope underneath his door and that had $1,000. And he said, as far as he was concerned, the few days he's remembered in his life were Pearl Harbor, the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and the day that the postman brought that $1,000 check to him.
Yeah, I think heck man, even now if someone slipped me an envelope with $1,000, I'd that would be a red letter day for me.
I know, but it'll only be good for a couple of trips, runs to the grocery
That's
store
right. That's
now.
right. That's a carton of eggs and one Starbucks coffee.
Exactly.
So what
Pretty
do you
soon, the way we're heading, we're going to be walking. We're going to be carrying shopping bags full of
it'll
dollars.
get
I hope
better.
not.
It's all going to get
I
better. What
I
do
hope
you
so.
what do you think the appeal is then for this era of authors? Like what, why do you think they stand out? Because it does seem like they stand out when you start kind of comparing them to the pantheon of authors throughout the ages. This era, that of Ian Fleming in particular, is I don't know, it's golden in some way. What do you think it is about that?
Well, I think if you look at the giants of literature, you start off with Edgar Allan Poe, and Edgar Allan Poe was the first man who came up with the detective who's kind of like a thinking machine, and
Yeah.
a lot of the psychological mysteries, and he's an iconic figure. And then you go to Sherlock Holmes, and Sherlock Holmes was this first popular detective who would right the wrongs and was a forensic expert and was an anti-hero. Who the heck wants to share a room with Sherlock Holmes? I wouldn't. And then
I don't know.
you
Did I get
carry
the
that on.
opium? Did I get to have the
Yeah, no,
opium?
I don't want anything to do with that guy. But anyway, I love him, but it's people you love, you don't want to, you don't want to live with everybody you love.
Yeah.
But and then you look at Poirot, and that's this detective from Belgium who has a lot of the makings of an underdog, but is so intelligent and so sharp. And then you look at Ian Fleming, and Ian
Yeah.
Fleming created the literary Marvel hero.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why. So if you look at these four figures in fiction, from the writers to the characters they created, you have this kind of a recipe where a lot of people then might have been kicking themselves, asking themselves why they didn't come up with it. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
wouldn't it have been easy for somebody to come up with an intelligence officer who loves champagne and loves the finer things of life and loves caviar and is fantastic in martial arts and is just, charming in many respects,
Yeah.
and it always makes sure to come out on top time and time and time again. I mean, that seems so obvious, but in the case of Ian Fleming and all these great writers, they managed to dismiss concerns when somebody probably told them, hey, that's been done to death. And they probably said to themselves, or that's not been done to death. And they probably said to themselves, well, if it hasn't been done to death, I'll do it. And if it has been done before, I'll do it. And that confidence, that level of slight narcissism is what makes a writer very, very successful because they think that they can do it most of the time better than anybody else can.
Right. I'm actually glad to hear that. I've got plenty of narcissism. All
Well,
right.
it's helpful. It's helpful. I mean,
Yeah.
in my business, and I'll give you a quick story. I remember a writer. I still don't know her name. I hope she's out there. And she sent me this wonderful, wonderful manuscript. But it was a short story, and I was at that time more focused on mysteries. So I sent her a very long letter, and I said, "Can you please send me a mystery because I guarantee I'll publish you." And she never replied back to me. And then I had one writer, and he would flood our PO box with like 5 stories a week.
Yeah.
And now he's famous.
Yeah. Good to know. See that there you go. It's that consistency and persistence, right?
Persistence trumps talent. And
Yeah.
maybe I'm cynical sounding when I say this, but it just gives hope for people. If you have a little talent and you're persistent, you'll go a long way.
Yeah. That's good to know. That's good advice for all the writers listening. Let's talk a little bit about Strand. What is kind of the overall I've it's been in my sphere for forever. But what's the sort of overall mission of Strand Magazine?
Well, the mission is always to keep things different. Always, we never want to be that predictable magazine where people will just look and say, "Okay, seen the Strand, been there, done that." It's
Yeah.
kind of like the literary taste of consumers can kind of be like some of my friends in New York when I would be saying, "Hey, have you been to this Greek restaurant I like going to?" And they'll be like, well, it had its day. It was exciting 15 years ago, and we're going to other, finding other places to go to. And so that's why we always try to have, for example, we published a short story by Tennessee Williams about this professor who visits Italy and to see his girlfriend, and that's not a mystery. Or we'll publish a Yo Nesbo story about a man who's uh, in this little remote island, and he sees that a funeral is being planned, and then he realizes that it's a funeral being planned for him,
Yeah.
to interviews with people like Peter Ustinov, Paul Giamatti, who's like the biggest mystery fan and the most educated mystery fan I have ever spoken to in my life.
Really? That's
So
interesting.
yeah, he has read probably 50 times more mysteries than I have.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I don't think I've ever heard that before. I didn't even
No,
realize he wrote.
yeah, he does not write, but he reads so many mysteries. I told
Oh,
him,
I
I said,
see.
I said, you should write a book. And he said, I will not write a book because, I've read so many mysteries. I don't think I can, I think I'll just like channel somebody's voice that's not my own. But it's just so incredible to have these
Yeah.
conversations with writers and actors and people who love mysteries. And that gives me hope that people are still reading mysteries and that this will just continue going strong.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember reading like I've I think I've read interviews that you've done with like John Grisham and people that I emulate. And it's always been enlightening, you know. Like I said, I'm obsessed with these things because I'm always trying to kind of figure out the thing they're not telling you, the secret that they're not sharing, or that maybe they're not even aware of about their career, so that I can sort of, you know, ape it.
Exactly. And it's just the great thing about mystery writers, they're very generous. I mean, I know some people have been to science fiction conventions and they've found that they're not as collegial as mystery writers.
Yeah.
But I think mystery writers, and I'll ask you this question. Do you think that the reason they're just so mostly, I don't want to tell some stories, but mostly they're very generous and kind people because they get all their aggression out when they type up a story?
I could see it. I could see it. Here's my take. I think people who write mystery more than any other genre have to understand human beings, and there's no way to understand a human being without loving human beings. And so you become affable with everyone you meet because you're trying to learn something from them. You're studying them so that you can put that on the page. That's my take. It may be a bit rosy glasses.
No, you know what? I actually agree with you because, I've known Jeffery Deaver well over the years, and he's one of the kindest people in the mystery world, and he writes the most horrible, horrible, horrible
Yes.
people on the
Yeah.
planet. I mean, his people are so scary that and I'll ask him, I'll say, like, how are you able to do it? And he said, well, if you look, I write all these unpleasant people, but I always try to find the moment in their life that made them choose this path. He said,
Yeah.
and with me, nobody's all that bad. He said, because even the worst people, very few people are saying, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad
Yeah.
guy. And to me, that was very, very enlightening. And there are some people in the mystery, especially maybe in the thriller genre, where the villains can be cutouts. But
Right.
people who write general mysteries, they understand, as you said, the whole thing of characters, the whole thing of the world being in shades of gray rather than black and white.
Yeah. 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 Humanity is kind of a spectrum, but it's a spectrum of two colors.
Exactly.
So, all right. So what's the one with Fleming and Green is that the May edition, May 2025 edition?
The
Yeah.
actually the spring/summer
Spring
issue, and
slash
it's our
summer. Yeah.
yeah, and it's our 75th issue, so that's why we had to do something special. We also have C.J. Box,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
Denise Mina, John Floyd, who wrote his 30th story for us, and an interview with Amor Towles. And I know he's not a mystery writer, but
Yeah.
he's a fanatic of the world of noir and Chandler and Hammett. So if you
Yeah.
talk to Immortels about the noir masters, he won't stop, which is
Yeah.
good.
Well, I know I'm mostly a thriller writer, but I can't wait to see the Kevin Tumlinson interview show up in the Strand
Okay,
magazine.
we'll do that.
All right. Well, we're out of time, so we're gonna have to wrap up. But I'm going to tell everybody that they can find you and and find your back catalog and everything at strandmag.com. Is there anything else you want everybody to know? Take away?
Nope. It was so nice talking to you.
You too, Andrew.
It's rare to get people to ask the right questions, and it was just fun. It was nice to have a conversation.
I loved it. All right. All right, you stick around, and for everyone else, the entire Writers Inc. Host cast is going to be up just next. So see you there. So were you guys fans of either Ian Fleming or Graham Greene beyond just James Bond?
Honestly, I've only read one Ian Fleming book, if I can be honest.
Was it a Bond book or was it one
Yeah,
of
it was
his
a Bond book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I honestly, until you just said that, didn't know that he wrote anything other than James Bond. So like I've got every James Bond book. I actually just got the last one that I was missing. So I've got the entire collection. But I've read all of them when I was a kid. I just got them again because I want my daughter to experience that.
Yeah.
But I have never read Ian Fleming as anything other than the author of James Bond.
What I like about Fleming's books, the Bond books in particular, was that, a book might be between 40 and 60,000 words. Like, this is usually
Yeah.
pretty short,
Pulp.
pretty quick to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually surprised me when I started getting these books in because I had to source them from all these different places. It's hard to kind of find a complete set, and they started coming in the mail, and like they were like a half-inch thick, 100 pages, 140 pages, these small little things. Like I remembered them as being novels when I was a kid, but that's
Yeah.
obviously perspective is everything.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
they're all short.
So you think that is there something we can learn as writers about the concept of looking for hidden gems? Like, so we're not publishing other people's work per se. Maybe some of us. But what about, like, how do we translate that as writers? Where are we looking for our own hidden gems?
Manuscript hunters.
The TV show, the new TV show coming out.
There you go.
I mean, for me, like in the terms of Clifton Strengths, have high ideation input. So I will vomit out ideas constantly. I probably have a ton of things that when I was just starting out were high concept ideas that never
Mhm.
got anywhere because of the skill or because of something along those lines. So being able to dredge those up, if I can even find them again,
Yeah.
there might be some gems in there, if I ever need it. But I think that I'm more of the forward progress person.
I
Yeah.
only even have my career because of that exact thing. Because I was dared on a podcast live to write a thriller because I was a sci-fi and fantasy guy, and so I took the dare, but I didn't know what to write, and so I went thumbing through a whole bunch of story starters I'd kept, and just kind of pieced like 4 or 5 of them together and made my first thriller novel,
Yeah.
and then the rest was history.
Yeah.
Well,
I
let me
don't
ask you
usually-
guys a question. Just
Go ahead.
undiscovered material in general. Like we've all got it probably somewhere. Does anybody else in your life know where to find it?
Good question.
Can I tell
Do I
you that
want
at
them?
Author Nation last year, there was a whole panel on that, and I took notes and took the PDF. And you know what I've done with it since November? Nothing. I need to
So-
do that at some point.
I'm holding up an envelope. This envelope contains all the information my wife needs if I were to just die suddenly, to tell her how to get into all my accounts, I think I wrote where my books are, but I need to go back through it. But like passwords, things like that. It's a very dangerous
Well,
envelope.
I need to
That's
do that.
fantastic, but you're not going to be around to mail it. So how's she supposed to get it?
Well, the lucky part
Hopefully
is
they
she
live
lives
together.
in the same house as me.
Does she know to look for it though?
Yeah, I've told her about it. It's here. She'll spot
This
it.
is-
It's got her name on it.
This is my dead Kevin letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, my husband does know where all my passwords are. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I was thinking about this while I was listening to the interview. Like my wife doesn't know where to find this stuff. Like it's all on my Mac. I've got everything nice and neat and organized and stored in Dropbox and all these different things. But she wouldn't know where to look. And in a hard drive, like if you don't know, like it's
Yeah.
literally gone. That could get tossed. I've got a ton of stuff from the early days that's printed. Like file boxes in the attic and things like that. But that's, kind of a lost thing, right? And I'm guessing like the Ian Fleming story and stuff, it was probably on paper somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't print anything anymore.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's a good thing to bring up, JD. And I don't think we think about it enough. There's a lot of talk. We talk a lot nowadays about like, you know, our estate, like, making sure that they can continue to get money from the books, etc., which is very important. But I never really considered like, how do I make sure she knows that there's stuff that if suddenly after I die, I become really famous and popular, like where could she find more stuff and what
Yeah.
should she do
Well,
with it? That's a
you
good
know, like
thing
Mike
to think about.
James, Patterson, he just wrote that book with Michael Crichton, and like,
Yeah.
Crichton's wife literally found that in a drawer. I know that's the story. They always say it was found in a drawer, blah, blah, blah. But like, she really did just find, a stack of pages going through a drawer one day.
Yeah.
And it just, honestly, it makes me think that I should be printing like all of this stuff
Hard
out and just
copies.
have, have a hard copy somewhere
Yeah.
because hard copy outlives everything else, whether, we like to
It's
think hard
true.
drives and stuff are gonna, live forever, but the truth is they don't.
Yeah.
Paper
Unless there's
can
a
be,
fire.
those pages I've got behind me from Stephen King, like that was 1980 something, and they probably look exactly the same today as they did then.
Yeah.
They're gonna be around longer than me.
Yeah. That's a
I
good point.
just know if things are left to my son, he is not much of a reader. He's just gonna chuck that. So I don't know how we mitigate that. Like,
Well, that's kind of my worry. You figure you pass away, somebody's going through your office, they look at your computer, who knows what happens with it. Maybe they wipe
yeah.
it, at some point, but then all that's gone. If they're in a hurry and they stumble past, whatever, like if you don't have it all labeled, I don't know.
Yeah.
I need to get better organized, I guess is the moral of this story.
I think that's what we all just discovered.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
all need to be better organized.
Let's mail
Absolutely.
everybody mail everything to JP. He's going to print out hard copies
That's
and
it.
file it all in a nice cabinet in
There.
his office.
I can't even do this for myself. Wow.
So Andrew had mentioned that he thinks, you know, authors need a kind of they need persistence, but they might need a touch of narcissism as a sort of essential element to keep going in the face of rejection. So in each of your experience, like how do you cultivate that confidence and resilience to keep going, even if you're not submitting things that might be rejected? How do you
I
keep going when you hit a
confidence,
wall?
I don't know, but tenacity is just part of my personality. So
I
I
think
don't
they're
know. I'm just gonna keep going at this, even if I don't feel
yeah.
good about it. So
That's a
I
guild
don't
on the
know.
same coin, though. I mean, I think yeah, tenacity. That's
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's valuable.
I don't know. I was
I
just born that way. I'm just tenacity and spite is like my whole personality.
yeah, spite for me too. Spite and audacity is what I always say is have the audacity, because there's always somebody who you're like, wow, they were able to do this. And it's like, why can't I have the audacity to also do that? Why can't I, like,
Yeah.
what are all those stopgaps that are preventing me from being that person? And to really just own that audacity and be like, sure, I am that person. I can do it too. Like there's
Yeah.
no reason why they were able to do that and I can't. It's just the mindset, more or less.
Yeah. For me, it's just never underestimate my willingness to self-destruct. Whatever it's going to cost me, I will go through it because this is the thing I am going to have, whether
Yeah.
the universe wants me to have it or not. Spit in the eye of the great moat of the universe.
But on the other side of spite, I just have to shout out. Now I know he said thriller writers are the nicest people, and I think this is true.
We're
But
pretty hunky-dory.
sci-fi writers are also very collegial. I was at a sci-fi conference in January, and they were all so nice. So shout out to sci-fi writers. We love you too.
I will say though that the nastiest comments I ever got about being a self-published author came when I attended the Nebula Awards. So
Oh, I think that will have changed
enough
now. What
said.
year was that?
It's changed by now, I'm sure. But
Yeah,
at
you
the
know, I
time
think
that I was
maybe if
going,
we're talking 20 years ago, that might have been the case. But I
was
think
not
things
20
have
years
changed.
ago.
It was like 60 years ago, Kevin.
Well,
Just so
actually,
you
no.
know,
You know
like,
what? Come
my
to think of
God.
it, it was nearly 20 years ago. Now that I think about it, it's just very
Thank you.
painful for me to think of 2016 as being 20 years ago. So
Kevin was up against Asimov for best debut
yeah,
back in the day.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
all right.
that's all I got.
Beautiful. JD, who's up next week?
Next week, we've got Tess Sharp coming on. Tess is the New York Times bestselling author of The Girls I've Been, as well as numerous books for kids and teenagers. Her latest novel is called No Body, No Crime and releases July 15th. Tess Sharp.
Sounds great. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.